resigned. His flagship policy was for the free ports shit, which must be Nigel Farage's wet dreams. It's all about tax avoidance.
When you say a very small minority, are you referring to Rishi Sunak again?
And pretend you're right wing for the minute. What would you say you think globalism is then?
Given the fact that prime ministers versus lettuces, we're not exactly we're not chalking up the W's as a culture, right? The
severity of him coming up and saying, "Oh well, now we've got Rishi, Brexit's not going to happen properly," despite the fact that Rishi Sunak was the one who actually backed Brexit from the start.
Yeah, in terms of Reform UK, did you see, unsurprisingly, given that racists don't like brown people, Nigel Farage was not happy with Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister?
Let's have a look.
He had a few things to say. Yes, old Nige, the weird little duck man. Honestly, when he crashed in that plane was the funniest thing that I've ever seen. That was good. Anyway, unrelated.
So then, in the last few months, we've had 4 Chancellors of the Exchequer. Yes, we've had 3 Home Secretaries, 2 monarchs, and now our 3rd Prime Minister. Yes, September's loser is now October's winner. Sunak is our new Prime Minister.
Look, he can get away from that. As much as Nigel Farage is a racist prick, Rishi Sunak can never get away from the fact that he lost to the shortest serving Prime Minister ever.
And now we have the shortest Prime Minister ever. We finally have a short king in charge of the country. If anything, that's the biggest win for minorities, is having a short king as Prime Minister.
True. Also the youngest in modern times as well.
Yeah.
42 is a year younger than Tony Blair. Yeah, so we've got a young, short man.
We have the
sounds like the name of a drill artist, young.
It really does. We're looking forward to the manlet ascendancy. Let's go.
Yes, let's have it.
Almost hear you cheering from here. What does it all mean? Well, Boris dropped out. You could feel support ebbing up the weekend. Even former employers, The Spectator and The Telegraph, were saying now is not the time. He said in his statement that he had 102 MPs supporting him. Well, you can believe that if you want to, but he's been quite well known over the being economic with truth. Thought he had a shot at being PM again. He would have gone for
having to agree with Nigel Farage on anything. It hurts me on a deep, profound level. It injures me to have to do it, but there he is. It's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Also, what wanker has a fucking Union Jack cushion?
I was looking at the whole time, by the way. I was actually starting to not really listen to what he's saying, just thinking he's cushion.
Yeah,
behind the headrest, which is just to show that I love Britain.
Yeah, but exactly, it's behind the headrest.
Yeah, for someone who has a go at people all the time for virtue signaling, if this is not the biggest fucking virtue signal you've ever seen.
Yeah, it is pretty tragic. Like, if it was the cushion, it was on the other side, you'd say, oh, maybe he's got neck problems. That's not a problem. But like, that's just, look at me, I like Britain. Good.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck's sake,
now I'll proceed to have sex with the cushion.
Yeah, it's this cushion that's probably in China. Imagine.
Which is, it's probably not. It's probably behind the headrest because it's probably like starched solid full of the cum that he's expunged onto it.
Oh Jesus Christ! Yeah, don't hit it with a hammer; it will shatter. Yeah.
For it, but he says put country party, meaning he can have another go at some point in the future. So it's Rishi Sunak. What does all that mean? Well, you'll hear a lot about stability, the real stability. Quite right, exactly what we bring a of all the policies government's last 12 years. The tax burden under Rishi has gone up, highest since 1950. It will go, with no doubt, great global is staying in place. It'll go to even higher levels.
The great global is that a new thing? Is that just globalist but a slightly different take?
Yeah, they've
have you not been the right have been using globalist for the last couple of days?
Oh, you know, globalist, but he said the great global, which makes it sound like a fucking monster or something.
Well, he's realised if he says
he
globalist,
probably just fucking says no, because I fucking tweeted him earlier, that prick, because someone said, please can you not say globalist because it's a dog whistle, right? I said something like, do you know what? Most people saying the term globalist probably don't know what it means. But the fact that, Nigel, you've been told it means it's an anti-Semitic dog whistle, and you've continued to use it, so he fucking knows. In terms of global, I think that was just a fucking mouth type, hey? He's spouting fucking utter shite. So anything that comes out of his mouth, he's putting buzzwords out there now, which is the favorite tactic of the right. Random buzzword.
True. I mean, I think he's kind of realised that everyone can see that he's echo posting. Obviously, from the tweet he did earlier today. I don't know whether this video or the tweet came first, but if the tweet came first, he might realise now that saying globalist, everyone actually now knows, right, that it's a dog whistle, that they can hear the echo posting. So he's trying to slightly move away from it by saying something slightly different.
Well, the same way they don't say cultural Marxists, they say like neo-Marxists or something like. It's the same thing. You just mean Jews. Just be honest about it, you fucking bigots.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, and whenever you say like, well, give me an example of a globalist, George Soros. Oh well, they can't be anti-Semitic.
Yeah, the Rockefellers, right? Like.
Yeah, Rabbi.
And the thing is, if it's a conversation on like global capitalism, that's a legitimate conversation to have. However, we've had global capitalism arguably for over 100 years, so you can't really be like, well, we've got Jeremy Hunt in now; he's a globalist. Now, mate, we've had successive governments essentially being global, if you want to talk about that, in terms of global capitalism, not because we've ushered a new kind of politics. We've had nothing different, and this is what reform aren't going to offer. Is what UKIP can offer. It's like we need a new politics, which is just even more Thatcherism.
Yeah.
Depressing thing is that politics has not changed whatsoever for 45 years. It hasn't changed. There's been different strands of the extremity of it, but it's not changed. So when people, and it must be a dog whistle for these guys, because when they talk about globalists, in my head, I think of globalism, which is an economic system, then yeah, that's a great conversation to have. Talk about the type of globalism we have isn't good with global capitalism and exploitation, especially from the global south. That's a good conversation. But because since we had that for over 100 years, I think we can all guess that they're not talking about that.
No, exactly.
No, exactly. And Nigel Farage doesn't get to claim to be like anti-globalism. Wasn't he literally an investment banker? That's where he made his money.
Well, he loves that shit. He was flying off to America to spend time with Trump. His wife is German. Like, in what way is he not like in league with the globalists? The thing is the interesting thing is that what I've been seeing a lot of in my YouTube comments, which apparently is just full of the most insane people. And if anyone's seen my tweets I've done about them, they've said some strange shit. What I keep hearing as well, and especially in some like the GB News and Talk TV comments as well, I think that's where I check for my to get my kind of contact with lunacy. Is that people are going on about both Rishi and Boris and Liz Truss saying, oh, they're all just World Economic Forum puppets. I'm like, what do you think? What do you think the World Economic Forum exists to do? What do you think their goal? What do you think their incentive structure is? And they can't tell you because they don't want to admit
international Jewish control of the white man.
Well, exactly. That's what they think, right? But they can't. It has to be a weird like conspiracy with somebody. It can't just be capitalism doing capitalism how it wants to. Like, well, they're using the power of their money to control governments to put forward the globalist agenda. That's how capitalism has worked forever. It's always been governments being beholden to the bourgeois. That's how capitalism works. It's how it's always worked. It's not different now. Now that it's more obvious because the corporations are larger. They wield so much more power, and they're global, so they can control. They can bribe multiple governments at once.
But you see, that's why the left and the right are the same, though, because the right are talking about globalists and Jews controlling everything, and they're like, you know what, we don't particularly like global capitalism, so we must be the same. Well, as a centrist, they're both exactly the same, right?
The horseshoe thing.
When you put that argument forward, and when you say from the left, like there is issues when it comes to a global capitalist system, because by the way, you can't end globalism. I know there was lots of talk from the UKIP that said we reject globalism. You can't ever do that, but you can reject a certain type of globalism, which is a real analytical view on global capitalism. Centrists will literally look at the left and the right, and go, well, it must be the same.
Well,
There's very different reasons.
It's important to make sure that the way when we talk about this, as you rightly say, Curtis, is that the fact is that the two criticisms are diametrically opposed, not because they critique the same thing, but they can critique different parts of the same thing, right? And the right wing think that it must be some kind of deliberate act by some kind of unscrupulous actor trying to usurp the system, whereas what we understand as leftists is that it is the system. That's how the system works. The incentive structure is generating profit. You have to spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to join the World Economic Forum. If you didn't think you were going to make returns on that investment, as the CEO of the company, why would you invest the money in the first place?
Yeah, you know what, actually, I think Maria in my chat makes a very good point. Anti-Semitism kind of is the real horseshoe theory. That there are people on both extremes who buy into that shit in weird, like, global conspiracy type JQ way. And that is kind of true, actually. I think that I've definitely seen evidence of that.
That is definitely
I've always rejected the horseshoe theory in its entirety, but I definitely would concede on that particular point. You're absolutely right. It's not an equal horseshoe. You've got essentially 90% of the anti-Semites are on the right, and then you have got on the left and I wouldn't say it's grossly anti-Semitism. We hate Jews. Fortunately, it's where, and I found it a lot with sort of Corbyn fans on Twitter, by the way, who are just random Twitter accounts, not anyone influential, that thought everything was a smear. And I was like, yes, some of it is, a lot of it was a smear, but it doesn't mean that fucking everything is a smear. Like there's definitely blind spots when it comes to anti-Semitism on the left, and there are definitely people that can fall into the trap of like the George Soros controls everything because of their correct view of global capitalism and our correct view of capitalism, right? Unfortunately, they've fallen into a trap. I guess that is a horseshoe theory in terms of anti-Semitism, but if you ask me, it is very different. I think on the right, it's literally just hatred. On the left, a very small minority, unfortunately, and I can see Chris Williamson doing that now.
When you say a very small minority, are you referring to Rishi Sunak again?
Don't do that. I'm so proud that he's Prime Minister. Not put in my that message sends that people like me cannot go through and become Prime Minister and inflict misery on millions. Well, that's my dream. My dream is to join an elite party, become incredibly rich, and destroy lives of the millions. Okay,
yeah.
Are you white people can do that?
Racists, please.
I think I want to add on one last thing onto what you said at the end there, what you said previously though about this horseshoe theory stuff. I think the difference is though is that once a left-wing person starts talking about a global cabal of Jews controlling everything, rather than talking about the system of capital, are they even left-wing anymore? Like, surely the whole point of the left-wing critique is that it's supposed to be a materialist analysis, not an idealist analysis. And once you go from materialism to idealism, you stop being a left-winger, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
that's when you get that left-winger who becomes a class reductionist and starts joining the Workers' Party with George Galloway. Yeah. George Galloway, and then you start saying, "Who's that other bloke? That ginger twat? He's a proper blue Labour guy." No. What's his name? He's been, and he was saying he was.
The guy on GB News, Paul Embry.
Yeah, that's it. Sort of typical blue Labour guy, where like that's it there, where he's no longer left wing, because I think that the class reductionists don't understand that actually there's always been radical social movements alongside radicalism in terms of like economics. Obviously, like the miners' strike teamed up with the LGBTQ community. That's always worked hand in hand. You can't have class only or social only. It's always both. And I think you're right. When people start thinking like that on the left, they're no longer left wing. And obviously, a lot of people essentially like, oh, of course you're gonna fucking say that, but it's true. Part of socialist isn't just about recognizing that we are living under an economic system that doesn't work for people, but it's also realizing that the economic system works hand in hand by pushing down minorities too. You have to have
superstructure
an analysis of both social and economic issues. That's what makes you a socialist. It's a socialism for fools, that guy once who said.
Well, that's the two
ends of the... my laptop, by the way.
I was just going to say, Are you going back on camera at all? No, just MTG. It's not a problem one way or the other. I just need to know for my
Okay, yeah, I can do.
so I
Yeah,
can
yeah. I did.
rejig my screen.
Yeah, I was wondering where your camera went. I'm just going to stick my laptop and yeah, I'll be back.
Yeah, no problem. No, it's just I've got you both lined up on the thing, and then when you go off camera, your icon drops to the bottom of the screen, so it's then me and I forgot.
Oh right, no, so you never usually have me on camera, so
no, but I thought there's two different voices, and I thought people might get confused. Are we watching a video? Who are the voices? You know,
that's fair.
Because my audience are fucking stupid. They are stupid people. They give me money. I mean, they're just ridiculous human beings. I love them.
Just as in last stream, where they give you money before following.
Yeah. Sometimes they will subscribe before following, which doesn't make any fucking sense. These people are lunatics. I love them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Then don't forget you can both subscribe and follow me and No Justice MTG and Turn Left. You can do these things. I believe in you.
You can join even. You can join on YouTube for 99 whole p. It's less than a can of beer.
Which, true, and is basically worthless now.
What do you think of this comment, actually? Cerdan on YouTube says, there's a difference between globalism and internationalism.
Well, I think, yeah, because globalism refers to global capital, and internationalism refers to the the international movement of the working class, right?
Yeah. Well, you've got to separate out what the right wing call globalism. Because what they call globalism, doesn't really have a proper definition, which is part of the problem and part of the way they do it. It's meant to be purposefully vague so that it can apply to basically anyone I don't like / the Jews.
Pretend you're right wing. Put your mind in a hellhole and pretend you're right wing for the minute. What would you say you think globalism is then? To try and get in the minds of these people.
What do they think globalism is? Well, like I say, it depends, because it's meant to be vague so that anyone can use it from your average Tory fuckhead right the way through to like hardcore neo-Nazis use that phrase, and it can mean various different things. But it means it can mean at the more serious end of it, it's a push against the concept of nationalism, the idea of breaking down international borders and that. So it's a kind of anti-nationalism or a kind of reaction to nationalism, which at least in theory could be a real political movement, although I would suspect that it isn't actually. It's just a thing that's kind of, in the same way that the nation state came to be, eventually it will cease to be. It's just a movement of history. And then you go from there, or they're against us. They, quote unquote, are against us, and then it goes straight forward to out and out.
For sure. I think that makes sense. Yeah,
Nazi
that's what I was
hate
going to say. Yeah, it's going to come down to this idea that whether or not you should put the national interest over the global interest, or vice versa, right?
Because why care about refugees and immigrants when we should be taking care of our own? There's too much immigration in this country. But also, I think it's more toxic than that. It's our culture is being diluted. Other cultures, and we've lost our sense of culture. By the way, British culture is quite shit, actually.
Given the fact that we've prime ministers versus lettuces, we're not exactly we're not chalking up the W's as a culture right now.
What is British culture other than Colin the Caterpillar cake and like Greg's the Bakers, right? Like is that like the peak of British culture as far as I'm concerned? I mean, I love Greg's.
No, Love Island. Love Island is the peak of British culture.
That's millennial culture, right? But when people talk about culture in a reactionary way, they're talking about the fucking flag shagging. They're talking about the royals. Talking about wish we could control women again.
Yeah. They're often talking about race and stuff as well, which is
they are
really worrying.
I mean, you literally did you see Douglas Murray talking about securing a future for white people? I'm like, he was literally fucking 14 words posting. It's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the point: is that it goes beyond it being like I say, just about a certain culture or whatever. This is why they reacted so badly to the COVID situation. Not just that they're very prone to conspiracy theory bullshit, but the idea that there are people around the world who can affect us and we're them, and therefore actually we need to take each other into account. There are people who aren't below us that we should all be on some sort of equal level in order to protect everybody is just anathema to them. They can't
also,
have that because we're better and everyone else can fuck off. Is their basic?
It's also, you can see them how
credo.
they fundamentally believe in some kind of hegemonic Western group, and in the same way that white nationalists for some reason believe that Europeans are a hegemonic group, despite them in no way being anywhere near hegemonic, right? In the way that they've treated the difference between Ukrainian refugees and like Syrian refugees or Libyan refugees, right? In that they were very happy to have Ukrainian refugees be given visas in France, put on the Eurostar, and then been given a home to live in, fleeing from Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But as soon as people are fleeing the war, like the war in Syria, which is just as bad as the war in Ukraine, if not even worse, because it's been going on for longer with multiple different sides involved. Suddenly, as soon as it's the brown people diluting the culture as far as they're concerned, then they get up in arms about whether or not we should be taking in refugees. But when it was Ukrainians, to be fair though, that never used to be the case. It's taken the joint refugee crises coming from the Middle East and coming from Ukraine for white nationalists to suddenly realise Slavic people as being white, which I find very amusing.
Yeah, the expansion of what counts as white has been fascinating over the last 100 years.
Whiteness is very political in that there, and I'm actually working on a fucking long video, which I need to get up my arse and finish reading. But I'm making a video called "The Invention of White People." Essentially, it is a political concept because racism in a way was actually kind of invented, if like almost overnight, and that years and years and years ago, people identified more through their religion. We would say as white people today. Back then, a lot of people would say, "Well, I'm a Christian." Yeah. So that's how, and not enough people know this, that whiteness is very much political, and it can be expanded and it can be contracted.
Well, as the son of an Irishman, I'm very well aware of, having studied my family's history, how we weren't always considered white, but now we are, and that's the thing.
Well,
in terms of actually, if you wanted to, so I was just going to say, for your research for your video, I would advise you to watch. Are you aware of Hakeem, who is a tanky, unfortunately, but he's a YouTube creator?
Know who Hakeem is?
Yeah. Watch his videos on scientific racism. They're actually very good.
They're very good, yeah. Like Hakim's a bit hit and miss, but it's good when his videos are good. They're very, very good. It was also interesting to look at how with when white nationalists will always point towards Rome as being this monoculture that proves that there is some kind of ethnic bond between white people that stretches back thousands and thousands of years, when they had no conception of whiteness. They had Romans and barbarians. That was their kind of
well, they literally there were African emperors of Rome.
Exactly.
They literally were. Yeah. At the time of the building of Hadrian's Wall, the governor of Britannia was African.
Well, it's the same way these same people get angry about films that depicted non-white people fighting alongside the Allies in world wars, and I'm like, hang on a minute, what the Gurkhas? Like, didn't we spent 2 million people fought from India in World War II?
Yeah, well, not just that. I mean, I remember Lawrence Fox going on about, was it the film 1917 or whatever it was called? There were brown people there. Yeah, there were some fucking brown people there, you racist prick. Yeah, that did happen. And
that's the thing, though.
You're talking about. So I was just going to say, you're talking about the Indian Land Army, 2.5 million people, the largest ever all-volunteer force ever mustered on planet Earth.
Well, literally,
in the Second World War.
Like in the early 20th century, we had the Nawab of Pataudi playing for our international cricket team at a time when you thought they'd be at their most racist, right? And they were still letting, I guess, royalty, but nevertheless, people from India be playing on the cricket team, right? Like, there was always been brown people for as long as there's been in the UK, for as long as there's been colonialism.
But the thing is, as much as like Lawrence Fox is a prick, people are racist through just being ignorant. So when people look at like a film like 1970, I think it's 1970, was it? And they see like people of color, they're like, "Oh, do you know what? This is just because they want to change history, and it's just wokeism." More people knew that no, that's just fucking facts. I don't know if it would really. Then maybe there's a racist instinct inside them, but I argue that everyone has racism instilled in them, even me as a brown person, right? We were taught this, that there's it's through the ignorance that the racism grows. Someone like Lawrence Fox will make a different excuse because he's a fucking ginger twat. And
ginger should come in. What's the ginger?
I was just about to say apologies to anyone who's ginger here, but it's only because it's Lawrence Fox and Paul Embry.
Check the beard, motherfucker. I'm not having this ginger phobia on the channel. It's outrageous.
Yeah, you have a beard. I mean, Lawrence Fox isn't. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, but aside from the anti-gingerness, the ginger phobia, the point I'm making though is that I just think that obviously someone like Lawrence Fox would just fucking a number of views. But even just having conversations with my friends and family who don't like it's kind of weird to say this, but they don't want to be racist. Yet through the lack of like education on basic things, that when they see something, oh my god, why is there brown people in World War II? We were all white. Must be wokery. And then you've got political opportunists say, yeah, it's all about wokeism. Then they get sucked in. Just basic political education would help. But then I would then again argue that there's a reason why there's not basic political education, because they want to keep a lot of people racist.
That's why you see this push towards school choice, right, in America. They always talk about like patriotic education. Remember how I think I mentioned this before. How there's all this stuff about teachers grooming kids, right? It's about LGBT stuff. This only started in the United States, specifically because they wanted to push school choice legislation on local boards, right? That's it. It's the only reason this discourse exists in the first place, because they wanted to undermine the public education system. And they want to undermine the public education system because they do not want their kids being taught about the reality of the history of British and American, history, because otherwise they would have to understand that a lot of what they've been taught previously is wrong, and they would be less racist.
Yeah, so there was a black guy on Twitter I saw who's like, I'm teaching my kid American history. She is going to fucking fail. Because he was like teaching them the actual history.
Yeah.
And the school don't.
Yeah.
Back to Farage. Should we finish Farage to Farage? Let's go. Wow, you were nearly TOS. Good lord.
Nearly.
What does all that mean? Well,
the same way that
you'll hear a lot
was being almost TOS by saying that someone's managed to get a leg niggle from treading on a cricket ball.
Ooh. Yeah, you've got to be very careful.
True.
Careful.
Maybe I should be clear with my L.
It was fantastic, and it was a black guy, right? And he said I misspelled a certain word that we can't use in searchable groups of people to talk to on what's this? Is it Omegle? The site where you can like the people to talk. Yeah. And he misspelled it and found ginger people, and he was like, actually, they're really cool as well. I had a good time.
People from the country Niger.
Niger, please.
Niger.
They speak French. That's how it's pronounced.
I just pronounced. Yeah, it's straight. It's pronounced. There's a funny TikTok about that.
Yeah, because they're all French in that. Because colonialism is a thing that not just did. So that's a thing.
About stability. That Rishi will bring stability. Quite right. It's exactly what he'll bring. A continuum of all the policies of Conservative governments for the last 12 years. The tax burden under Rishi has gone up to the highest since 1950. It will go, with no doubt, Jeremy Hunt, the great globalist, staying in. All on the self-employed businesses will continue. Bear in mind, from April the 1st, corporation tax 6%. Remember,
but not even up to the point it was in the 90s. Like, it's still going to be lower than that. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, it's like in America where they're going to crank it back to below the level it was before Trump, and they're talking about this as if it's going to be a catastrophe. The right wing are just fucking insatiable.
They really
Their
are.
money hungriness is just, oh god. Yeah.
Laundrette pays dividend. Rex, the small limited companies pay themselves up 1.25%, and the vicious IR5 rules to stay absolutely in place. We'll change that. We will continue with low growth. We will continue with low productivity. But it's okay. The markets are low.
We don't have low productivity. That's a lie.
We do have low productivity.
That's actually a lie.
Productivity is supposed to be quite. Hold on. Farage, if he was about to finish this, was he criticise the market, the free market then?
Well, we'll
I mean,
yeah.
it's
We'll
like
see. Hang
to-
on.
the thing is, actually,
That would be incredibly funny.
I think our productivity is high globally, right? But I think the issue is our productivity has stagnated over time, right? Because if the issue is the moving to a service economy, the moving to kind of casualized work through the gig economy and stuff like that, and the destruction of our manufacturing sector has made us less productive. But that's not an issue with whether we have low or high taxes. That's an issue with fucking neoliberalism and the over financialization of the economy
I've always
that
felt
was running on fumes, right?
I've always felt when we talk about productivity, and you see that a lot on the left, Aaron Bastani always says about the country has low productivity. I feel like it's quite obscure though, because what are you talking about? Are you talking about what you just alluded to, that with the fact we're moving to a service economy, and if you were to look at the number, looks like we're low on productivity, or is it a metric of somehow how hard we're working? Obviously, we would all say we're working harder than we ever have for lower wages. But actually, when someone comments on productivity, I wish they were a bit more specific of what they're actually alluding to.
Well,
Is
I
it-
am. Being a streamer is like working down a coal mine. It really is.
It
My
really is.
productivity is
Did
crazy.
you not hear Ian Dale spends 3 hours thinking about multiple things?
Oh,
And that makes
God.
it really hard
Oh.
jobs. James O'Brien, his job is hard.
My-
He works harder than a builder, getting
Yeah.
angry on the radio
My
for
f-
2 hours in the morning.
My favourite thing ever.
If as
I
intelligent
think,
as
is-
James O'Brien, though, then it must be hard being in his mind, though, because he's a fucking genius.
Yeah.
Like he literally wrote a book about how to be, and I was like, oh my god, I want to be right so much, and I didn't realize he has a book that I can just
My-
read, and I'll be right all the time.
Yeah, my favourite new thing before Boris Johnson exited the stage. This is an amazing to imagine writing this and think this is like a thing. Yeah, we Brexited. Yeah, Boris Johnson appeared intent on going all the way. At 8 a.m. call this morning, he was dressed for the job, quote unquote. One colleague was surprised to see he had his shirt tucked in. Wow, I mean, he's really pulling out all the stops with his crazy. He had his shirt tucked in. Maybe he'll comb his hair. Maybe he'll put some fucking effort in.
Yeah,
Like,
but
is
at
that how
least
low the bar is for this dude?
yeah, but at least he bowed an appropriate angle and doesn't have a coat that pisses off David Aronovich.
That's true. That's true. Although the fact that you David Aronovich racist,
You kind of triggered me a little bit as
a little
well.
bit anti-Semitic.
Actually, there's no.
No, don't, because if we're going to talk about that, then we have to bring on David Baddle. Because if we don't
David
personally
Baddle,
promote his
true.
book, then we're all anti-Semitic.
Very much so. Very much so.
By the way, buy his book, because I am not an anti-Semite. Buy his book.
Well, I've already ordered his book, and I can't wait for it to be coming home. It's coming home. It's good. He did a song. Yes.
And he was also blackface at one time, but we'll forget about it. This is
He
David Baddle.
was.
Buy his
I
book.
guess have you not seen Corbyn's Maoist bicycle?
True. Hang on. A Maoist is a bicycle that only runs over landlords?
Fingers
how does
crossed.
one have
In
a
Minecraft.
Maoist bicycle?
Like it. A bit. The crocodile catastrophe, which of course Border Force themselves now say is a threat.
The person filming this, how are they out of breath? They're sat in a car. It's really annoying.
How many takes has he
Security.
done though? Maybe he's tired because he kept
Yeah.
fudging up globalist.
Like Dan Wootton
Eventually
style when he
changed to
did
global.
like Dan Wootton doing the multiple takes of putting the flowers on the outside Buckingham
Oh.
Palace.
True. Think
What do you
he
mean?
could
That was-
have
that
pulled
was-
he could have pulled a muscle in his leg having to bend down.
I'm sorry, no. That was clearly first time. Like, he clearly meant that, and it was just coincidence that someone had him in focal shot.
So,
And then they lit up the camera. It was a coincidence. Can that man not respect the Queen in private in front of millions of people watching on his channel and all those around him? And
yeah.
the guy's some slack for fuck's sake.
Well, someone suggested in my chat, is he also giving him a hand? Which would explain the panting, I imagine, but
Possibly, very
I
possibly.
can't say. I can't say.
So I want to apologize to Iron Madge. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were also ginger, so I've got a lot of apologizing to do.
Very much so. Yes.
Actually, he says I'm becoming a Tory now because I'm being discriminated as a ginger. Okay, well, I guess I am a Tory enabler then. With the
We are, the
central
ginger-
well, right
look,
about me. I'm a
Look,
Tory enabler.
all I'm going to say is we've had our first brown prime minister now. When's when we're going to have our first ginger representation?
True.
When's that happening?
No, that's just woke. Sorry, but you're just You focus on
Bro.
identity politics now. Come on.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, they go broke. Clearly.
That will continue. Oh, by the way, yesterday, 80 people, young men, landed on a beach near Dover and disappeared into the countryside. Lifestyle.
Based. Yeah, good. Fuck you.
Excellent. The more the merrier, as long as they make you angry specifically, Nigel.
I
am very happy
hope
for them.
I hope they all fuck your wife. Yeah, 100%.
Last I heard, 6 had been rounded up, 20 still on the run, including one charming young man who broke into a woman's house in Aycliffe in Kent and demanded a phone and wanted money to get to Birmingham or Manchester. How?
Yeah, he's welcome. He's welcome in Brum.
And I'm
Yeah,
sure that
fuck
definitely 100% happened.
Yeah, exactly. And it happened just on camera. All his friends were agreeing, and that young man's name was Al Einstein. So facts.
How lovely. What a nice start to a Sunday morning. Nothing will change on the channel. On Brexit, well, we will continue with more and more people being disappointed about Brexit because it's frankly not being done. Nothing is going to change. That is their definition of stability. But here's the big reason why Rishi is a disaster. He cannot connect with ordinary working class voters in the Red Wall. Hey, he spends more heating his swimming pool whilst they can't.
Look, that's obviously true, but I'm still flabbergasted that Nigel Farage thinks that he can connect with them outside of just being a racist.
Also, what's crazy here is he's saying that Brexit's not going to happen. It has already happened, right? We are
Yeah,
not
it's literally
a member of
already
the
happened,
European
yeah.
Union anymore. What is he thinking?
Exactly. I'm so sick of it because it's like how it's almost like, and still do, people blame current finances on the Labour Party, right? It's kind of like that now. It's like in 20, 30, 40 years' time, oh my God, we've got a Prime Minister that voted Remain 40 years ago saying, see, this is why Brexit hasn't worked. It could just be, even though, in my personal opinion, I nearly voted myself, that Brexit was never going to work on its own terms. It was just a thing that was never going to work. And rather that there's no political will to make Brexit work, it's because Brexit just wasn't going to work. I think that he knows this. He fucking knows this. He's just using that as his last little ditch as to become politically relevant.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. If they just
He's the biggest grifter in politics.
Yeah, if they just claim that Brexit hasn't happened yet, then anything that happens is not a result of Brexit because Brexit hasn't happened.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just the never-ending excuse.
It's also the temerity of him coming up and saying, oh, well, now we've got Rishi, Brexit's not going to happen properly, despite the fact that Rishi Sunak was the one who actually backed Brexit from the start. Liz Truss was the one who switched from Remain to Leave when it had happened and wanted to make sure that she stood at the front, which is still in frontline politics, by backing Brexit superficially. And Boris Johnson only ever supported Brexit in the first place because he thought it'd be good for his career. Like, if anybody in the Tory top brass at the moment is sufficiently pro, or could be seen to be sufficiently pro-Brexit enough, surely of all of those people, it's Rishi Sunak, exactly. And he was the one throughout the whole time talking about free ports and charter cities, all the shit that Nigel Farage really wants to happen. Because again, he's just at the end of the day, all of this reactionary stuff is all just a Trojan horse for him to be able to put through like kind of the decimation of workers' rights, the decimation of
But no one should take Nigel Farage seriously for various reasons in his entire history. But let's just take the last month. He literally was spunking up all over himself over the mini budget. The mini budget, which crashed the pound in record time, has been widely seen as one of the most catastrophic moments in recent British political history, including Brexit. And Nigel Farage thought it was the greatest thing ever and was really disappointed that it isn't happening now.
It might be the most misjudged British political decision since the Suez Crisis. I think that's how far back you have to go to find something as poorly done as a more stupid political decision for anybody to do. Right? Like, obviously the Brexit vote was silly, but at least it was democratically mandated, right? Because there was a referendum. But this was just a policy that nobody supported, nobody voted for, apart from a very tiny minority of Tory MPs, was done completely cynically with no backing, with no proper economic chops behind it, immediately tanked the pound, immediately everyone's mortgages went up 200, huge amounts of people's mortgages went up like 200 quid to make them completely unaffordable, tanked their polling to record lows. It's this, what political event since the Suez Crisis is worse politically at the very least, as a misjudgment than the mini budget.
And also, not to mention, to go back to Brexit, when people voted Brexit, a lot of them thought, okay, I want to vote Brexit to improve my life. So I've made this video a while ago about why there should have been a stronger Lexit campaign, even if, regardless how the vote went. I always maintain that we'd be in a better political position. The political landscape would be a lot better if there was a strong Lexit campaign. And I think the left should have capitalised on this.
Do you want to explain for my American viewers what Lexit is?
Lexit, right. So Lexit was a left-wing exit. Essentially, for those that aren't familiar, unfortunately, when the Brexit debate came up in regards to the vote, you're hoping that there would be an actual balanced debate on Brexit. You would see a lot of socialists on the left talk about it, and of course, you would also see it on the right. A lot of the media ignored the left in terms of Brexit, and it became a left-wing and right-wing issue, even though Brexit is not a left-wing or right-wing issue. There's many socialists who have always been against the European project. Now, as somebody who voted
Remain... very much in the original joining the European Common Market in '75, the Labour left were against it and campaigned against it.
Not just the Labour left, but the Labour Party. Remember, you had people like Hilary Benn who was against it.
Yeah.
So
Tony Benn.
No, Hilary Benn. He himself said, "I've changed my view," because when he was a youngster.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I was thinking the Parliamentary Party. He must have been too young back then. But yeah,
he would have been too young.
Yeah.
Because he said, he made a speech and he said, "Look, I've obviously changed my view." So the idea that essentially the mainstream Labour Party were against the EU back then in the 70s.
Yeah.
Right?
And Margaret Thatcher as a backbench. No, was she backbench or she might have been a shadow minister? Anyway, was campaigned in favour of joining.
Yeah, she was pro EU. It's quite fucking funny.
So it's completely flipped in the last 40 years.
Yeah, but the EU referendum was never a left-wing or right-wing issue. But I've always maintained that I wish there was a stronger Lexit argument, because actually, if you look back in retrospective, it doesn't actually matter, because left anyway. A lot of people were trying to silence the left on leaving the EU by saying, don't, because if leftists make a big noise on leaving the EU, we might leave. Just fall behind Remain so we can remain. Well, we've already left now. Well, actually, if there was a strong left-wing leave campaign, we'd probably be in a better position than we are now. And then we could have made arguments that we could materially improve conditions on a left-wing Brexit. Because no matter what fucking James O'Brien says, there were obviously issues with the EU when it came to nationalisation. There were competition laws. There's different ways you can interpret it, but it was obviously harder to do certain things, certain socialist policies under the EU, and would have been a great argument for a left-wing exit, which could improve people's material conditions. Because we don't have that, and it was just basically Brexit was dominated by the right, then people will fall into what Nigel Farage is saying, because people's material conditions haven't improved, they've gotten worse. And of course, that's down to free market capitalism, but he can easily say, well, things got shit because the fucking globalists. It's because we haven't done if we've done Brexit properly, we can make this nation prosperous. No, it's not. It's just fucking capitalism.
Yeah, by ceding ground on Brexit specifically to the right, the framing of all Brexit issues is through a right-wing lens. So there's just no. If you want to compete, you have to eventually sidestep all Brexit issues to be able to talk to people about left-wing political issues right now, which makes it impossible to be able to agitate for our own views until the Brexit issue is sorted. And again, it also is why 2019 happened in the way that it did.
Is completely bang on, because there was an authoritative figure or figures on the left, which was largely from the People's Vote, which is essentially, if you back Brexit, you're not a progressive, you're also racist, like some people on the right are. And that really was the epitome of liberal politics, which is like surface progressivism, without talking about class, without talking about materialism. There was a good case, and also in terms of democracy as well. Like in the end, I mean, people accuse me of being a Brexiteer. I've been called, even as recently as a few months ago, that you voted fucking Leave. I voted Remain, for fuck's sake. I was sympathetic to the Leave argument, because, and if there was a stronger left-wing Brexit campaign, I probably would have voted Leave. That would have been a much more class consciousness. There would be a much more class conscious left wing today if it had some space in Brexit. But you're absolutely right. The left can no longer really touch Brexit.
But
Because
you say you voted Remain, but you know who else voted Remain? Jumbly Crumbles. So you're an anti-Semite. Checkmate.
Jomley crumbles.
Yeah.
Why not? Because I'll get fucking triggered by him because he's not only incompetent, but he's also competently racist.
True.
Both
Heat their homes.
he's everything I hate. He's everything that everyone hates at the same time.
Yeah,
He's incompetent, but he's also sinister.
Yeah.
true.
Are we basically done with Farage so we can jump onto Sir Keith?
There's only a minute left of
because this
Farage.
was-
There's only a minute left of Farage. Might as well finish it off.
True, but with this three, I mean, I'm done by 11 because I've got a panel about incels. But with this 3 minutes has taken about an hour. It's ridiculous.
What are people
Not
watching?
necessarily that being rich is a disqualifier, but he can't even go and talk to people. And there's nothing wrong with being a teetotaler. But can you imagine Rishi sitting down at Working Man's Club in Doncaster and talking to the gang? I can't, and I'm sure you can't either. There's no humour, there's no humanity. He may be respectable, he may be decent, he doesn't have the pizzazz. You can kiss goodbye to the rebel.
Yeah.
And in terms of the Eurosceptics, in terms of those fighting for conservative principles, all of that is also out of the window. You'll get
Rishi Sunak voted for fucking Steve. What are you talking about? Euroscepticism's gone. What are you
He's
talking
so
about?
pro free market shit. Like literally, his whole campaign to be leader at the start, when Boris Johnson resigned, his flagship policy was for the free ports shit, which must be Nigel Farage's wet dreams. It's all about tax avoidance.
Yeah, exactly.
He's also going to lose loads of seats in the Red Wall to that typical working class lad, Keir Starmer.
Yes.
The bloke who also goes to the pub, goes, "Hey, you're up." Off.
Yeah, as he sips on a G&T in the corner. I can imagine.
How do you
that.
do,
That's
fellow
not-
proles?
Exactly.
none of that with Sunak. This pretty much guarantees a Labour government, despite the fact that it's led by the lifeless Sir Keir Starmer, a man who can't even describe what a woman is and won't say whether Eddie Izzard
Cheek transphobe for literally no fucking reason.
See
Not
what
relevant
I
to
mean?
the
We
thing
all know
at
where it's
all.
going. We all know where it's going. The right-wing economic platform has died, so they're going to have to smuggle it in through ulterior means. So it means they're going to ramp up the culture war to 11.
What bombs? Yeah. Ridiculous.
should be put on an all-women's shortlist. I mean, you wouldn't make it up, and yet it's all fallen into Labour's
There are
lap.
no all-women
thought you did-
shortlists.
Oh yeah, but also I thought you were against the women's shortlist, so surely smuggling a quote-unquote man onto the ticket would be okay for you,
Yeah.
Nigel?
It's for people who say that they can't. For people who say that they hate identity politics, they sure are absolutely fucking obsessed with identity politics. In fact,
As the right does, the
right-
best in
yeah,
projection. That's all they do. All they
The right-
fucking do is
yeah.
pure projection.
yeah. They've always been the political side that are obsessed with identity politics. That's always been the way, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why they do this JQ shit, because it's like, oh, you know, they're taking down the white man. No,
Yep.
like it's that thing completely. They can hide it behind some nonsense about fucking national sovereignty or whatever, but we know what it is. Like it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Also, cheeky little phone box in the background. You don't see many of them anymore.
The deep frustration is the first past the post electoral system, and just what do we do? How do we fight back against this given the system we've got? I don't yet know all the answers to that.
He's right about the first past the post system.
I
but
agree with.
it was very funny when he third in the general election total vote and got one, which was already a Tory seat anyway, which had gone over to him. I have to say, I did laugh. Fuck
It's
you,
funny
Nigel
now.
Farage.
It's funny now that Labour are looking like a huge landslide because of first past the post. All the rightoids now like, oh, electoral system is screwed up. It's absolutely fucked. Despite the fact that Nigel Farage
Yeah, they were the biggest
literally-
proponents of it.
Yeah, and Nigel Farage was one of the people who explicitly pushed his Brexit party to only stand to contest Labour-held swing seats. because he
Yeah.
wanted to be able to manipulate first past the post to be able to install Tory candidates where there wasn't previously a majority for them.
But no, it's okay when you get a Tory party dictatorship. That's fine.
Also, on the flip
Yeah,
side, I'm
yeah.
absolutely loving the follow back pro EU. It's like, yes, we can get PR on the agenda. It's like, Keir Starmer might win a massive fucking majority under first past post. He ain't going near PR. He never would have anyway. You're fucking deluded if you think this man is very conservative in every single fucking policy is not gonna fucking back
No
PR.
way. No, it's absolutely no way.
Oh,
no way
would
at
you?
all.
I'd say what if Keir Starmer, I wouldn't back it. If I could get a fucking 100-seat majority, which is probably what we'll end up with, a 100-seat majority, which is huge coming from an 80-seat from a Tory party winning an 80-seat majority to a 100-seat majority. That's fucking huge. Would you do it? No.
It has no. There's
But it's not
literally
just
no
the
reason
fucking
to
right
do
who is
so.
shit on electoral reform. It's also not the left. The Liberals are also fucking terrible on electoral reform as well.
Yeah, 100%.
They're all fucking deluded.
The SNP also back electoral reform, despite the fact they know it would cost them like 20 seats, because they actually have, at least the SNP have some fucking principles.
Well, the SNP should back PR, and then if they ever get PR, stand everywhere. Because
Yeah,
I'd vote for them.
Yeah,
Fuck it.
100%.
Yeah.
Same.
They're the
Yeah.
best of all. Other than I mean, I don't even know what Plaid Cymru do. I'm honest with you. So they're probably the best. Them and the Greens. I'd probably put them 1 and 2 with Labour 3 maybe.
Well, I mean, I'd definitely
Tory
vote for. I'd vote for Mark Drakeford. I'd happily vote Labour in Wales.
I wouldn't just vote for him. I'd let him use me like a fucking ragdoll. You can have that.
Well, the thing is,
But the thing is, and it would be nice. Sorry, you carry on.
I was going to make this point about things with electoral reform. It's actually in Keir Starmer's position. You could still use your gigantic majority and still do electoral reform that's not proportional representation, right? And it would still be positive for Labour. Actually, I think that given the current political climate, I really think that a ranked choice vote. I made this point to Kev when we watched Question Time together. A ranked choice voting system, even with this gigantic majority, would still be an improvement for Labour, because there is still a vote split on the left, right, or the quote unquote left, or the left of the Tories, right? Like, there's still, what is it, like, going to be like a 40 point, there's like a future, if the polls stay the way that they are, 19 points for the Tories plus 4%, 5% for Reform. Is like they get an extra 5% on top with the second preferences. But with 10% for the Lib Dems and another 5% for the Greens, that's an extra 15 points worth of second preferences for Labour. So even with if electoral reform on a ranked choice voting basis, the Labour would get an even bigger majority, and they would push the Tories further into irrelevancy by implementing such a policy, which would be more democratic and also better for Labour as well. So that's, if you ask me, that's the route I think they should go down.
I agree. You've also got the question, Keir Starmer is very conservative. He probably just believes in first past the post as well. It's not. I mean, it's not just about, even if Labour, and I agree with you, it's not like people are going to suddenly switch to smaller parties overnight. You're most likely going to get most people sticking to who they're going to vote for. Most people still vote Labour and PR. I don't think you'll get that many switchers, not for a long time anyway. But you're absolutely right. In terms of second preferences, Labour will still do fantastically well. I don't think it's not just strategy for him. It's because he is very conservative. I don't think a lot of people realise that he's deeply conservative.
Yeah.
He back first past the post on principle, regardless.
This is the thing. Any actual Labour leader would, I think, potentially look at it and think to themselves, well, this would be a way of keeping the Tories out. Because just on terms of the raw number of votes, the Tories could never, ever get into government on absolute PR. They just don't. They don't have it. Even with the DUP, there would always be a Labour, Lib Dem / Green / SNP alliance of some kind that could form. But he doesn't care about that. I don't think he gives a fuck about the Tories not being in power. He just wants his version of Toryism to be in power. He doesn't care about killing the Tory party at all.
Yeah.
And talking of that,